There are things happening in this world right now that should make you really, really angry. And if you've been swallowing that fury in the name of being a kind person, this episode is going to set you free. Being furious and being kind are not opposites, they can coexist. And today, I'll show you exactly how that works. Welcome to the Kindness Extremist Podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. I've spoken to tens of thousands of people all over the world about the importance of kindness. And I am obsessed with how we can bring more kindness into our daily lives and restore balance to a deeply unbalanced world. Every episode, I'll give you 3 practical strategies to create a kinder world, and I'll do it in 30 minutes or less. No fluff, just valuable, actionable content that you can implement in your life immediately after listening to help you actively create a kinder world. There's no time to waste. Let's dive in. What's up, my friend? Welcome back to episode 61 of the Kindness Extremist Podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. And as a reminder, if you're not already, please make sure to follow me on Substack at sholarichards.substack.com. And if you're enjoying this podcast, the best way to support this work is to leave a rating and a review. Both are deeply, deeply appreciated. I want to start today's episode with a question that I think is one of the most important and most avoided questions in the entire world of kindness work. Can you be furious? I'm talking genuinely, justifiably, righteously furious and still be kind? To be clear, I'm not talking about the everyday frustration of being cut off in traffic or being transferred 3 times by the customer service rep when you're trying to get your issue resolved. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the very real, bone deep, fire of 1,000 suns anger that comes from watching something genuinely wrong happen. The anger of a parent whose child has been treated unjustly. The anger of a person who watches a colleague get publicly humiliated and no one says a word. The anger of someone who's been lied to or deliberately harmed by a person or a system that should have protected them. The anger that keeps you up at night, not because you can't let it go, but because something in you knows that you're not supposed to, because it's pointing at something that really, truly matters. A lot of people who care deeply about kindness have a very complicated relationship with their own anger, myself included. They've absorbed a message, sometimes from their faith tradition, sometimes from their family culture, sometimes from the kindness space itself, that anger and kindness are incompatible. That being a kind person means being a calm, thoughtful person at all times. That if you're genuinely committed to love and compassion, that anger should somehow dissolve. Look, y'all, I don't believe that for a second. I believe that righteous anger in response to genuine injustice, real harm, or the violation of something that matters is not the opposite of kindness. It is, when handled with courage and with wisdom, one of kindness's most powerful expressions. And I believe that the inability to access that anger, to honor it, and to channel it is one of those under-examined reasons why genuinely good people sometimes fail to show up when showing up matters most. Now, let me be equally clear about what this episode is not. This is not a permission slip for cruelty. It's not a case for losing your temper and calling it righteous. The line between righteous anger and reactive rage is real and significant, and we're going to spend a lot of time examining that line today. As always, family, 3 parts, 3 strategies, and a kinder world will be waiting for us on the other side. Let's do this. Let me start with the most foundational reframe in this entire episode. Anger is not a moral failing. It is a signal. We talk about anger management as though the anger itself is the problem to be contained. We talk about staying calm as though calmness is always the virtue and intensity is always the flaw. And in doing so, we teach people, especially people who lean towards empathy and care, that their anger is something to be ashamed of, processed away, gotten past as quickly as possible so you can return to being good and kind. But here's what the research on emotion tells us. Anger, at its core, is what psychologists call a moral emotion. It's specifically triggered by the perception that something has been violated, a fairness norm, a person's dignity, or your deeply held values, whatever they are. It's your nervous system's way of telling you that something is wrong and that it matters to you. It's not noise to be filtered out. It is very often the clear signal that you have. This is where a critical distinction comes essential, though. There are 2 meaningfully different kinds of anger, and they require very different responses. The first is reactive anger. Reactive anger is fast, hot, and primarily about self-protection. It's the flash that happens when your ego is threatened, when you feel embarrassed or undermined. Reactive anger is not primarily about values. It's about threat. Left unexamined, it leads to things that genuinely undermine kindness, like saying things you can't take back, lashing out at people who don't deserve it, or punching someone in the face because they accidentally stepped in the back of your new Jordans while you're standing in line at the grocery store. The second is righteous anger. And righteous anger is slower, deeper, and rooted in something that exists outside of you. It is not primarily about your ego, but something that you care about. A person, principle, a vision of how the world should work is being violated. Righteous anger is what moved Rosa Parks to stay in her seat. It's what has driven every person who has put their comfort on the line in the name of meaningful justice. Honored and channeled well is one of the most powerful forces for good in our world today. The problem is most of us have never been taught to tell the difference. We're taught that anger was anger and that kindness required anger suppression. So we either swallow all of our anger indiscriminately in the name of being a good person, or we express all of it reactively because we never learned to slow down enough to understand what the anger was telling us. Neither of which is obviously the right choice. Let me tell you about something that happened to me several years ago. I was delivering a leadership training for an organization. About halfway through the day, a senior leader in the room made a comment that was racially dismissive about something that was happening in the news at the time. To be clear, it wasn't a slur. It was something subtler than that. The kind of comment that a lot of people might let slide because confronting it kind of feels awkward and the person clearly didn't intend harm. The kind of comment, if we're going to keep it real, I had let slide in similar situations before. But this time, I felt the anger come up immediately, and I had about 3 seconds to decide what that anger was telling me. Was it reactive? Was it triggered by my own discomfort, the desire to assert myself? Or was it righteous, rooted in a genuine value about the dignity of every person in that space and the responsibility that I had to the people in that room who just heard that comment and were now watching me to see what I would do? I took a breath and I decided that it was the second one. And I responded, not by blowing up, not by humiliating the person, but with a directness and a clarity that I don't think I could have accessed if I tried to push the anger down and perform composure that I wasn't feeling. So I said, hey, I got to pause here on just what was said because I don't think we can move forward without addressing it. Here's what I heard, and here's why it matters. So I named it calmly, specifically, and with the full weight of my conviction behind every single word. The room went still, and something shifted because what people witnessed was not an out-of-control explosion. They witnessed someone refusing to let something wrong go unnamed. Someone who was furious and kind at the same time. So here's the kind of strategy of the episode. The first one, I want you to practice what I call the anger inventory. Here's how this works. The next time you feel a significant surge of anger, resist the impulse to act on it immediately or push it away. Instead, sit with it long enough to answer 3 questions. First, what specifically triggered this? Not the event in general, but what precise thing activated the anger in your own mind? Second, is this primarily about my ego or about a value? Worded differently, am I angry because I feel personally threatened or because of something I genuinely believe has been violated? This is the question that separates the reactive from the righteous. And sometimes the answer is both, and that's fine. Third, what is this anger asking me to do? Righteous anger is always pointing towards a specific action, conversation, or stand that needs to be taken. The anger inventory doesn't make the anger disappear, to be clear. Its purpose is to help you understand what you're working with so that when you do act, you're acting from your values rather than from your wound. Okay, so you've done the anger inventory, you know what you're dealing with, you confirm that this is righteous anger rooted in something real, pointed at something that deserves a very real response. Now comes the hardest part, the pause between feeling and acting. When you're carrying righteous anger, the impulse to act is immediate and powerful, and there is a part of you that will resist any suggestion to slow down because the anger feels urgent. It feels like any delay is a betrayal of the thing that you're angry about. That feeling is understandable and so real, and it is, I want to argue, one of the primary ways that righteous anger unfortunately contributes to the problems that we're trying to solve. Okay, y'all. So in order for this to make sense, I'm going to do my best to nerd out on a little human biology to the best of my ability, so stick with me on this. When we are in a state of high emotional arousal, including justifiable anger, our access to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that is responsible for strategic thinking, long-range consequence, is significantly reduced, which means the limbic system, the brain's emotional processing center, the part that governs our instinctive fight, flight, or freeze responses, is now running the show. And the limbic system is not very skilled at the kind of precise, targeted, values-aligned action that meaningful advocacy requires. So the bottom line is this, and here's something to remember. Ironically, the stronger the impulse to act immediately, the greater the risk of doing damage that you never intended. I'll give you an example that'll hopefully bring this all together. Camille was a manager at a nonprofit and a leader who was deeply values driven. When her organization's leadership made a policy decision that she believed would directly harm the most vulnerable people that she served, she was furious. Righteously, completely, justifiably furious. And she was right to be. But Camille acted on that anger the moment that she felt it. In a full staff meeting, she didn't yell or name call or anything like that, but she was sharp, pointed, and she publicly characterized the decision in a way that backed the leadership in a corner and made it almost impossible for them to exchange course without losing face. The decision was wrong, the cause was right, and her approach made it significantly harder to win because the leadership team became defensive rather than reflective. Allies who privately agreed with Camille distanced themselves from her to avoid the fallout. And Camille, whose credibility and relationships were her primary tools of influence, found herself sidelined from the very conversations where her voice was most needed. Her anger, sure, it was righteous. Her timing was reactive, and the distinction cost the people she was fighting for. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist who spent time in a Nazi concentration camp and wrote Man's Search for Meaning, is often attributed with saying, in between stimulus and response, there's a space. And within that space lies our growth and our freedom. The pause is not where you decide whether you care or not. It's where you decide how your caring is going to show up in a way that actually serves the thing that you're angry about rather than simply expressing how you feel. So here is the second kindness strategy of the episode. I want you to practice what I call the temperature check. Here's how this works. When you've confirmed that you're carrying righteous anger, assess your current emotional temperature on a simple 1 to 10 scale. Don't overthink this. 1 is fully regulated, calm, clear, able to access nuance and strategy. 10 is fully activated. Blood pressure is up, thoughts are fast, the impulse to act is overwhelming everything else. The temperature check doesn't ask, should I act now? No, it doesn't do that because the answer is yes. The question is, am I at the temperature where my action will be most effective? If you're at a 7 or above, build in a mandatory cooling off period, not to talk yourself out of the anger or convince yourself that you overreacted, but to give the most thoughtful version of yourself the time that it needs. Go for a walk. Write down what you want to say before you actually say it. Talk it through with someone who you trust. Come back when you're at a 5 or below, still carrying the same conviction and clarity to be clear, but no longer at the temperature where you're more likely to do something dumb that you're going to regret later. When you do act, speak from your values, not from your wound. I said it before, I'm going to say it again. Name what specifically happened, name why it matters, and be clear about what you're asking for. Righteous anger that doesn't know what it wants tends to express itself as explosion. Righteous anger that knows exactly what it wants tends to express itself as power. Please remember the difference. Hey, fellow kindness extremists, it's me, Shola. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, if you're mowing what I'm growing, if you're smelling what I'm stepping in. Okay, I'll stop. If you're enjoying what you're listening to so far, I would love it if you would take a moment to hit the subscribe button and leave a rating and a review. Those incredibly kind acts go so far in helping me to reach as many people as possible who will join the movement to actively create a kinder world. I appreciate you so much, my friend. Okay, let's get back to the episode. This is where I want to get as concrete as possible because I think this is where most people get stuck. They understand the distinction between righteous and reactive anger. They understand that pause, and then they ask, okay, cool, but what do I actually say? How do I hold both my fury and my kindness at the same time without canceling out the other? I want to start pushing back on one word, calm. Don't get me wrong, I love calm. In a previous episode, I even shared that one of my mantras is calm is strong. However, there are times where I don't think calm is the right target, especially in truly unjust situations. In those situations, the target is not calm. The target is clear. In other words, being grounded and in full possession of yourself, you're able to say exactly what you mean in the way the other person can and actually will receive without losing the full force of your conviction. Here's the framework that I use, and I've seen it work in some of the most charged situations I've encountered in my work. I call it name it, frame it, and claim it. First, name it means stating what happened with specificity and without editorializing. Not, you always do this, which is likely an exaggeration and easy to dismiss. And not, oh, that was disgusting, which is pejorative and easy to argue with. No, instead we need to rock with the specific thing that happened, stated as plainly as you can state it. The more specific and factual your naming is, the harder it is to dismiss and the easier it is for the other person to understand exactly what they're being asked to reckon with. That's the first thing. Second is to frame it, which means explaining why it matters, not only why it made you feel a certain way, but why it matters in terms of values, impact, and what kind of world or workplace or family you're all trying to build together. This is where the righteous quality of your anger becomes an asset. Because when you can explain not just that it hurt you, but why it was wrong in a way that connects to your shared values, you stop being an upset individual and you start being an advocate. And then third, claim it means making a specific ask or request. What do you actually want to happen as a result of this conversation? An apology? Change in behavior? A decision revisited? Righteous anger without a specific ask is just an expression. Righteous anger with a specific ask is a negotiation. And the cool thing about this, negotiations can actually be won. So here's an example of how this could play out. And sadly, it's a scenario that I've seen way too many times with my female friends and colleagues. Allow me to introduce you to Rachel. So Rachel was a leader at a large tech organization, and she was asked to be part of a steering committee where she was the only woman. During a high-stakes product review, a colleague dismissed one of her key recommendations without engaging with the substance of it, just moving right past it to the next agenda item as if Rachel hadn't spoken. Rachel had seen this pattern before with this person, and she was in that moment absolutely furious. She said nothing in the meeting, not because she was suppressing the anger, because she was at an 8 on her temperature scale. So she took the afternoon to compose herself. The next morning, she requested 15 minutes with her colleague, and then she ended up saying something like this. I want to talk about what happened in yesterday's meeting. When I put forward the recommendation about the launch strategy, the conversation moved past it without any response. That's the third time something like that has happened in a product review in the past 2 months. And I want to name it directly because I think it matters, not just to me, but to the quality of our team's decisions and the kind of environment we're all saying that we want to build. What I'm asking is that going forward, when I put a recommendation on the table, it gets engaged with, adopted, pushed back on with a reason, or tabled for a specific reason. I'm not always asking to win the argument. I'm just asking to be in the conversation. So let's break this down. First, she named it, what specifically happened 3 times over 2 months. Then she framed it, not just the personal hurt, but the team decision quality and shared values around the kind of environment they were building. And then she claimed it, a specific, reasonable, actionable request. Now, picture yourself if you were in Rachel's shoes. Would your voice be perfectly steady? If you're anything like me, probably not. The key in situations like this is to remain fully in control of our emotions, even though we're genuinely angry about something that's genuinely wrong. This can only happen when we've taken the time to understand our own anger well enough to put it to work. And yes, I know this is all easier said than done. I get that. Still though, just like Rachel, we can pause, take the necessary time to get our thoughts and feelings in order, and then address the issue with conviction and clarity. This is what it looks like to be furious and kind at the same time. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, fam. It can be risky to express our anger even when it's presented thoughtfully. And on that note, here's one more thing that I think I need to say here, because it often gets left out. Being furious and kind does not require that the other person responds well. Sometimes you do everything right, and the person across from you gets offensive, dismissive, or tries to turn it back on you. That outcome does not invalidate what you did. Your kindness is not measured by whether it was received well. It's measured by whether it was offered well, whether it was true, whether it was clear, whether it honored both your own dignity and the other person's humanity, even in the midst of your righteous fury. So remember this. You're responsible for the quality of your action. You are not responsible for the quality of the response. So here's the third and final kindness strategy of the episode. I want you to practice what I call the righteous action protocol. Here's the structure. When you have righteous anger that has been inventoried and cooled to an effective temperature, move through the 3 steps before you speak. Step 1, go through the name it, frame it, claim it framework. Write these down before you speak, if at all possible. First, name it. What specifically happened? Then frame it. Why does this matter in terms of values and impact? And finally, claim it. What specific change are you asking for? Get precise on all 3 before the conversation begins is the difference between an effective advocate and a really angry person. Step 2, set your intention. Before you walk in the room, take 30 seconds to ask yourself, what do I want the other person to come away from with this conversation? Not just what I want to say, but what do I want them to understand, feel, and do differently? This is where kindness explicitly enters the chat. If your genuine intention is for the other person to understand something true and do something better, rather than to punish them or prove a point, that intention will shape the entire quality of your delivery. Step 3, hold the line on dignity, yours and theirs. No matter what happens, commit in advance that you will not attack the other person's character. You will not match their energy by escalating if they escalate, and you will exit gracefully if the conversation deteriorates beyond what you can hold with integrity. Your credibility and your relationships are the vehicles through which your righteous anger produces change. Protecting them is not weakness, family. It is strategy. All right, my friend, let's bring this home. Today, we tackled a question that lives at the very heart of what it means to be a kindness extremist. Can you be furious and kind at the same time? The answer we built together is an unquestionable yes, with 2 conditions. 1, you have to understand your anger well enough to know what it actually is. And then 2, you have to give it the intention that allows it to serve the thing that you're fighting for rather than undermine it. In part 1, we drew the foundational distinction between reactive anger and righteous anger and introduced the anger inventory. 3 questions that slow the anger down long enough to understand what it's actually telling you. In part 2, we talked about the pause that makes the difference, and we committed to the temperature check, a simple scale for assessing whether you're at the temperature where your action will be most effective. This is the critical step that I hope you do not miss or skip. In part 3, we got concrete. We built the name it, frame it, claim it framework, and we committed to the righteous action protocol. 3 steps to ensure your most important tools, your credibility, your clarity, and your relationships are working for you rather than against you. I want to close with this. The kindness extremist relationship with anger is not one of suppression or surrender. It is one of mastery. You are not trying to become someone who doesn't get angry, which sadly was something I used to believe was the actual goal. You're trying to become someone whose anger is so well understood, so honestly examined, so precisely directed that when it does show up, and it will show up because you care about things that actually matter, it then becomes one of the most powerful tools in your arsenal. The world does not need more people who have managed their anger into numbness. The world needs people who are pissed off about the right things for the right reasons and who are strong enough, wise enough, and dare I say kind enough to make that anger count. That is you. I know it is. This is your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa, and you now know that kindness can't be weak because you just experienced the strength of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Until next time, my friend, the journey to a kinder world continues. Thank you for listening to the Kindness Extremist podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I have one favor to ask. If you could kindly hit the subscribe button, leave a rating and a review, not only would that be incredibly kind, but by doing so, you're actively playing a role in growing this movement and ideally getting us one step closer to creating a kinder world. I hope to see you next week for another episode of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Bye for now.